Okay, I think we are ready to go. So again, welcome for being here, or welcome to all of you, and thank you for being here. I'm so excited that you're joining me today. We're going to be exploring the Montessori approach and how it can be applied to the use of technology and screen time. But before we dive into the content for today, I want to share a few details that define me as your host and the creator of this presentation for anyone who may not have come to one of my sessions before. So as Dr. Lambert said, my name is Heather White. I'm a former Montessori classroom teacher, administrator, and in-home caregiver with more than 15 years of experience in the world of Montessori. I currently work as an educational coach. I work in multiple roles with the Center for Guided Montessori Studies, including as their alumni, conference, webinar, and professional development coordinators. And I assist with their MACT accreditation. And I'm also an instructional guide that supports adult learners who are working to receive their Montessori certification. Aside from that, I'm an adjunct professor at Sarasota University, which is the only accredited institution of higher education dedicated solely to Montessori. As if that wasn't enough, I'm also a blog writer and content creator for several organizations, including the American Montessori Society. And I've also done a lot of work with Guiding Row and Miru's Toys as well. I'm AMS credentialed, that's the American Montessori Society, at the 3 to 6 and 6 to 9 age levels. I have a national certification from school psychology, and I've obtained a master's in education with a concentration in Montessori studies, in addition to an education specialist degree in school psychology. I've also received certification in anti-bias, anti-racism from AMS, and I'm nationally certified as a Montessori coach from the National Center for Montessori in the Public Sector. For those of you who have attended some of my sessions in the past, as I typically do, I wanted to begin our time together today with a quote from Glennon Doyle, the author of Untamed. Glennon says, "When we hand our children phones, we steal their boredom from them. As a result, we are raising a generation of writers who will never write, artists who will never doodle, chefs who will never make a mess in the kitchen, athletes who will never kick a ball against the wall, musicians who will never pick up their aunt's guitar and start strumming." In today's world, technology is ever present. It surrounds us. It's in all that we do and really all that we are. But this quote reminds us of the importance of preserving that space for children and ourselves as well for creativity, exploration, and discovery. In Montessori education specifically, we recognize that boredom isn't an enemy. It's not something we want to fight against. Instead, it's an opportunity that we want to embrace that allows children to engage with the world around them, to develop their imagination, and to begin to create. So today we're going to explore how we can mindfully balance embracing developments in technology, introducing screen time, while also fostering an environment that really nurtures these crucial moments of growth and creativity for children. During our time together today, we're going to start by exploring Maria Montessori's own beliefs about screen time, and then we'll take a look at some screen time recommendations by age and type, and we'll discuss the negative effects that screen time can have on children. We'll conclude by talking about how we can set limits related to screen time for children and how to positively change their relationship with screens, including reviewing some recommendations for popular screen time alternatives. So Dr. Maria Montessori lived in the early 1900s, long before there were electronic devices or screens, and therefore she herself did not specifically address this topic. However, her beliefs and philosophy offer us some valuable guidance for how to navigate this modern challenge. Since she was a scientist who explored the world and her work with children led to a lot of curiosity. She likely would have wanted to observe children using digital devices before making a decision. So she used scientific data and observation for all of the things she developed in her method. So it's likely that she would want to apply that same approach to before she started making suggestions or declarations about the use of technology. My guess is that she probably would have been able to observe some of these harmful effects of screens that we're going to take a look at, that research is showing for people of all ages, and particularly for young children whose brains are still developing. And because of that, she likely would have used that information to guide the recommendations that she would make. I also believe that her recommendations would be made based on her emphasis in her current teachings that we are able to see, where she emphasizes the importance of real world, sensory rich experiences for children, especially those under the age of 6. She talks about how during this critical period, which she calls the first plane of development, that hands-on exploration is really what helps children understand and engage with the physical world. Unlike screens, which only provide children, and really us as adults as well, this limited sensory stimulation, these real life day-to-day interactions allow children to experience textures, sounds, and movement through this direct engagement that fosters a deeper sense of learning and really enhances and promotes their development. And so it's these experiences that engage all of the senses that really foster what we think of as holistic development, which is what Maria Montessori emphasized so much. So I believe that would really guide what she would have to say about the use of screen times as well. Research consistently supports Montessori's approach, and it highlights the critical role of these real world experiences and how they shape the neural pathways in the brain, particularly during early childhood. So, while, like I said, while screens do offer some stimuli, they really fall short of providing the same level of richness, the same multidimensional experiences that the real world offers that is necessary for that optimal holistic development. So, taking all of that into consideration, then, in the Montessori approach, screen time can be viewed through the lens of what Maria Montessori described as freedom within limits. When children use devices like phones, computers, tablets, there are some benefits, but it is important to establish clear boundaries around the type of content that they are exposed to and the duration that they use those devices. This not only protects their developmental needs, but also encourages that they're able to self regulate, which is a core Montessori principle and something that we know is absolutely crucial when it comes to the use of technology, even for adults, because it can become so addicting. So, by setting these thoughtful guidelines for the use of technology, as adults, we're helping children start to make conscious and balanced choices about screen use, which is really in harmony with Maria Montessori's philosophy of nurturing independence and responsibility. So we're giving them some freedom, we're allowing them to explore, but we're doing so in a way that is very structured, considering the negative effects that we'll talk about shortly, and also in a way that promotes their autonomy, that starts to give them some of that control so that when they become adults, they're able to make positive choices and conscious decisions about the use of technology for themselves as well. So, if we're looking at the impact of technology, the World Health Organization and the American Academy of Pediatrics provide us with some valuable guidelines for managing children's screen time. And this includes television, video games, cell phone use, tablets, computers, so anything involving a screen. So, for children less than 2 years of age, the World Health Organization recommends no screen time use for children. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends screen time in a very limited capacity for children this age. And when doing so, they recommend finding high quality programming that is co-viewed, meaning as the adult, we are viewing or utilizing the technology alongside the child. And the idea here is that we are having conversations about what we're seeing. We're pointing things out to the child. So it's more of an interactive, engaging experience than it is a very passive screen view. Then for children ages 2 to 5, the World Health Organization increases their recommendation just a little bit, but still very minimal to no more than 1 hour of screen time per day. And they make a really powerful note that less is better. So if you can have no screen time, that's absolutely the best, but you want to shoot for less than 1 hour a day. The American Academy of Pediatrics also recommends 1 hour or less of screen time, and they're describing this type of screen time as interactive, educational, pro-social content that again is co-viewed with a parent, caregiver, or educator. So again, it's not that passive receiving of information, but rather this engaging, interactive experience that happens alongside the adult. Neither organization offers specific recommendations for children once they are over the age of 5. However, the American Academy of Pediatrics does provide some guidelines for encouraging healthy use and also give some ideas for activities and how to navigate conversations with elementary age children and adolescents about becoming digital citizens, responsible digital citizens. Although data is hard to come by for older children, we do have some information here as far as the regulations, right, or the recommendations. It kind of flips then when we start to look at the amount of time children are using screens. So we know what the recommendations are by the World Health Organization and the American Academy of Pediatrics. But here's the reality. Here's the amount of time children are spending in front of screens. And this is where we have kind of the opposite challenge. It's that data is very minimal for the use of screens by very young children. But this is a quick look at the average amount of screen time that's experienced each day for children ages 8 to 18. So, and this is information pulled from the Centers for Disease Control. So you can see here that the 8 to 10-year-old is spending about 6 hours a day in front of a screen, with 4 of that being in front of a television. Then 11 to 14 years old, that goes up to 9 hours and 5 hours. And finally, an adolescent, 15 to 18 years of age, is spending about 7.5 hours a day in front of a screen and about 4.5 hours a day in front of a TV. So a little less. 11 to 14 years of age actually seems to be when screen time peaks. But you can see that it is significantly higher, although recommendations haven't been made for these age group of children. If we're thinking, we'll go back here for just a moment. If we're taking a look at this again and we see that 2 to 5 years old, children 2 to 5 years old should be spending no more than an hour, then you can imagine that it shouldn't be significantly higher than that for children who might be 8 to 10 years old, yet the reality is they're spending 6 hours a day in front of a screen. So just vastly different than what we would hope or what we would assume might be recommended based on recommendations for children who are younger. Continuing with the theme of what research has to tell us, research has identified 4 main categories of screen time: passive screen time, interactive screen time, communication, and then content creation. And we were talking a little bit about this just moments ago when we were looking at those recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics when they were recommending interactive, engaging experiences that are co-viewed by the adult. So let's take a look at what each of these different types of screen time experiences are. Passive screen time is, you can think of it as being on autopilot. So it's this mindless watching of videos or shows, scrolling on a cell phone or tablet or computer. Social media is a great example of this, right? You're not engaging with people, you're just scrolling through your Instagram feed or your Facebook feed kind of mindlessly. And I know I'm even guilty of this as well, that you do that and then you realize, wow, an hour has gone by and I've done absolutely nothing. And it's the same thing for children. I know children who get lost in YouTube videos or even television shows, right? It's just this mindless, passive experience. The next type is interactive use. Interactive screen time use includes playing games and things that require or involve problem solving. Communication is where screen time is used to video chat, and you'll notice it says social media. So that's a little different than what I was describing where you're scrolling, right? This is where we're using social media to engage with others. We're commenting on their posts, we're having conversations in private messages. So it's that back and forth communication that's happening rather than this passive scrolling experience. And then finally, content creation is where we are making digital art or music or coding. And although I would say this happens less frequently, coding in particular is something that has become very popular among elementary students and adolescents. So that's that fourth type of screen use that research has now identified. So then if we're thinking about all of that research information and we are trying to select different types of screen media for our children, whether it's a movie, a game, a TV show, some kind of app, it's really important to think about those types of screen time usage that research has identified and how it engages the child. While there's nothing wrong with a little bit of light entertainment, children can really benefit when you keep the 4 C's in mind when you're choosing screen time. And those 4 C's are connection, critical thinking, creativity, and context. And what you'll see is there's some overlap from those 4 types of screen time usage, right? Connection, that's that use of social media or engaging in some kind of communication. Critical thinking, that's those video games that require problem solving. Creativity comes into play with that content creation type of social media or screen time usage. So then let's talk a little bit about each of these 4 areas more in depth. So connection, what we want to think about when we're considering if a show is appropriate is how the child is connecting personally with what they're watching, what they're playing, or what they're reading. Ask yourself, are they engaged? Are they absorbed? Or are they inspired? Getting invested in a storyline or identifying with the characters really helps prepare a child for deeper learning because it fosters emotional and intellectual connections. The second thing we want to consider is critical thinking. We want to seek out media that encourages critical thinking by diving into topics, skills, or challenges that help children think deeply. So games or shows that involve strategizing, solving ethical dilemmas, or overcoming obstacles offer even more lasting educational value than just simple quizzes or trivia-based games, which might not promote as much meaningful long-term learning. Creativity, when we're looking at that as a way to choose specific screen time, we want to give children the opportunity to create something new, like designing a game level, composing a song. When children can put their own twist on an experience, they take greater ownership of their learning, and that enhances their engagement further and inspires this sense of creativity. I do see a note here in the chat. I'm just going to pause that someone's having trouble with the sound is if you're having trouble with the sound, well, if I ask you that, if you can't hear me, you wouldn't be able to respond, right? I'm thinking the sound seems to be okay for everyone. Is that correct, Dr. Lambert?
I'll put a note in the chat on how to maybe correct that.
Perfect. Thank you. So we've talked about critical thinking, creativity, and context. I'm sorry, we've talked about connection, critical thinking, and creativity. And the next area is context. So this is helping children understand how the use of the screen fits into the larger world. Again, we want to expand their experience outside of the use of the screen. For younger kids, especially, this is where those conversations and activities that follow a game or follow the watching of a movie are crucial. So it's that co-viewing experience, watching or playing alongside the child, asking them questions about what they're learning or what's happening, and then engaging in related offline activities really deepens the child's understanding and extends their learning experience. So for example, one way that I did this in my own classroom when I was teaching is we might watch a movie, let's say Charlotte's Web, and then we would read the book. And then we went to a local theater and watched a live production of Charlotte's Web. And then we had conversations as a group comparing the different things that were the same. What was different than what they expected? What did you notice in one that you might have missed in the other? Which one was your favorite and why? And it's this type of continued conversation and offline activity extensions that really enhance the child's learning. Especially when we're talking about very young children, we want to try to choose media that is high quality, interactive, slow paced, so things that the screen images change very slowly, educational, and pro-social in nature. And again, that you're making sure that you're co-viewing with the child, talking about what they're seeing and teaching them about the content that's shown. Slow-paced programming, which is also known as non-stimulating or lower stimulating shows, include longer scenes, calmer visuals, less rapid cuts, right? So you're getting rid of that rapid stimulation. And studies have shown that faster paced shows can actually lead to challenges with, or potential challenges with focus and attention. So what I have here is an example. We're just going to play a short clip, an example of what a slow-paced, educational, low-stimulating, pro-social, interactive content might look like for that would be ideal for a young child. What you can see is that the main character is talking to the child. They're asking questions. They're inviting them in. The show goes on to where the children are invited in to try to figure out what the clue is that the dog has left of something else that's needed for snack. And that's a theme in each episode is the lead character there, Steve, is trying to figure out what the clue is that Blue, the dog, has left for them. But you can even see things like the colors are a little more muted, the background simplified. When it shifted from the outside of the house inside, it was a slow progression. It was not a fast, rapid change, right? So all of these things make a child really engaged and it enhances their learning. And it because it's more interactive. An added piece about this particular show that's really wonderful, on top of it being engaging and slow paced, is that it's pro-social in nature, so that there are things that the child is learning. This particular episode is about more of a practical life skill, right? About what is needed first to eat snack. So lots of wonderful content that could be learned in a show like this. That's a great example of a slow-paced, appropriate programming that you might choose for a young child. So, even for very young children, many recommendations suggest allowing screen time if it's for something like a video call, that's something that's going to allow children to stay connected with distant family members like grandparents or maybe a parent who's traveling for work. Video calls can be a really meaningful way for families to maintain these relationships over long distances. So it's important when we go think back to that graph we saw of recommendations for the amount of screen time that you can make an exception for these types of communicative video chats. One thing to keep in mind is that research from 2018 indicates that young children may struggle to fully grasp this experience of video chatting without some guidance from the adult. So, again, we think about that co viewing experience. It's really important for an adult to be present during these calls so that they're sitting next to the child, they're actively encouraging their engagement. This supports um, really helps the child understand and participate in the interaction so that it becomes more meaningful and beneficial for them rather than this passive experience, like we talked about, where they're just watching the other person talking and aren't really engaged. So, then what does research have to say about the impacts of screen time? Researchers have found that excessive screen time and frequently having a TV on in the background while doing other activities are linked to things like lower language and social emotional skills, particularly for young children. Overuse of digital media also places children at risk for things like sleep interferences, obesity, and challenges with school performance, behavioral challenges, and also an increase in risky behavior. Additionally, studies have reported that exceeding the recommended screen time guidelines, particularly for children ages 2 to 3, correlates with poorer performance and developmental milestones when they're a bit older during the span of 3 to 5 years of age. In fact, MRI scans have actually revealed notable changes in the brain architecture among children who utilize screen time more than 7 hours per day. So, not only does it change behavior, does it change our biological experiences, things like sleep, and our uh, physical appearance, right, or our physical well-being, like obesity, but it also impacts our physical internal structures. It actually changes the way that our brains are structured. However, it's important to note that when children watch the educational content, like we've discussed previously, or co view programs with a parent or caregiver or educator, it can have a positive effect. So, if we're really mindful about the types of screen time usage and how often we're exposing children to that usage, it can actually help boost their language development. That presence of that engaged adult, that co-viewing experience, provides opportunities for the child to interact, to explain things, to engage in discussions, and that then enhances their learning and their understanding of what they're watching, and it also enhances their vocabulary. So it's not all bad. So then how do we set those limits? We know that technology is all around us. We know that children are likely going to be using it. And so how do we introduce it in a way that helps children become those responsible digital citizens that we talked about when they enter their elementary and adolescent years and beyond? So when you're establishing these boundaries and rules around screen usage, there are some helpful tips that you can consider. The first is about setting clear boundaries and expectations. Set clear limits on the use of screen time. Make sure a child knows how long they're able to watch. For young children, you might enforce these boundaries by saying something like, you can watch one more episode and then I'll turn the TV off. Or you might say, you can watch until the next commercial, and then I need you to turn it off. You can also use things like a kitchen timer or something called a time timer, which provides a visual cue of how much time is remaining, because that helps the child really understand um, what time they have left. It can be a little ambiguous and vague when you say watch until the commercial because they don't really know when that change is happening. And these types of boundaries are helpful because now you're not the enforcer. You're not the one saying it's time to turn the TV off or it's time to put the tablet away. Instead, the timer is the enforcer, or the commercial that came on is the enforcer. When the TV show ended, it was the enforcer. So it really removes that challenge of pushing back against authority, right? It's giving the child more autonomy. It's also really important to designate screen-free times and zones within your home or within the classroom space as well. You want to create specific spaces that are screen-free. Maybe that's the child's bedroom and your bedroom as the adult. No screens allowed at the dinner table or while you're eating together, because that's how we promote strong family connections, relaxation when a child's going to sleep, and quality sleep, right? I know for me personally, if I'm on my cell phone, once I go to my bedroom at night, instead of reading or just kind of laying there and meditating or thinking, it's much harder for me to fall asleep. And it's that stimulation you're getting from the screen. And it's the same thing for the children. So ending screen time at least 90 minutes before bedtime is recommended. That allows the child's mind to unwind and prepare for sleep, which then promotes better sleep quality for them as well. The next helpful suggestion is to develop a family media plan, especially for elementary age children and adolescents. You can start having an open dialogue with children about screen time. Work with them to set their own boundaries for healthy screen time so that they have a sense of ownership and buy in, right? They're helping create those limits. Now, this doesn't mean that you will agree to allowing them to watch TV 7 hours a day if that's what they recommend. It's a back and forth collaborative um, conversation and plan that you build together. This plan helps you set media priorities as a team, right? Collaboratively, that you make agreements with one another that holds everyone accountable, not just the child, which leads to the next suggestion, which is leading by example. It's really important that we model healthy screen habits for children by demonstrating this balanced screen usage ourselves. So, since children, as we know, learn by example, especially very young children who absorb everything that they see, that 6 years of life, that first plane of development that Maria Montessori called the absorbent mind, it's really, really, really crucial that we show moderation and mindfulness in our own screen time habits so that we set that positive precedent for children. So, we can't develop this family media plan and designate screen-free times and zones unless we are also following through. We shouldn't be on our phone when we're eating dinner as a family. We shouldn't be on our phone 90 minutes before bedtime if that's what we're asking of our children. So just being mindful of that, because I think I know even when I was an in home caregiver, that's something that's really challenging, right? You get a text message, you need to check an email, and before you know it, you've been on the phone for quite a while. And not only are you not engaged with the child, but you're setting that precedent for them, that we are hoping that we can break. Finding engaging alternatives to screen time can also be quite a challenge, especially for young children. But there are various options that provide enriching experiences without relying on traditional screens. Some effective alternatives that you might consider are things like podcasts, audiobooks, CD players, or other types of musical devices, or screen free audio players. So for podcasts, there are actually quite a few podcasts that you can stream or download that are specific for children. on a wide range of topics, from things like stories to educational content, historical topics, or discussions even that are geared specifically for children. When it comes to CD players, although they might be a bit outdated, it's a great way for children to be able to receive some type of engaging stimulation without a screen. There are also more modern music devices that allow children to listen to music or stories or even educational content, right? That's where the audiobooks come in. Things like the Echo Dot from Amazon, right, provides that opportunity. And then when you're talking about screen-free audio players outside of those kind of music devices, things like the Yodo player or the Tony box are really wonderful, particularly for very young children. They use cards or little figurines to play stories, to play music, and share educational content as well. And what's wonderful is it's something that the child is able to manipulate on their own. So it gives them that independent access because they can choose the card or the figurine that they want, place it on top of the box, and it begins playing. So it's a really great way to foster their independence and promote their autonomy as well. What I want to kind of share as we wrap up is that balance is best. It's really important that you recognize that families and classrooms, caregivers, everyone will approach screen time in their own way. It's clear that there's no one size fits all solution. Each family's unique circumstances and routines are going to shape how they manage technology use with their children. However, it's being intentional about screen time and setting those consistent boundaries that we talked about that's going to allow you as the adult to find the right balance for you and your child that meets your needs. So, as we conclude our look at the Montessori approach to screen time, one specific principle here stands out, which is balance is key. While technology has a role in education, right, we know it can improve learning, like we talked about. The Montessori philosophy really emphasizes a thoughtful and measured approach, especially for young children. The focus should remain on offering enriching real world experiences that support a child's holistic development and their lifelong learning. A child might not ever have the opportunity to see a live ballet or to visit the Taj Mahal. And screen time offers those virtual opportunities for children to explore the world in new, exciting ways that they might not ever otherwise get the chance to do. So in Montessori, the goal isn't, and I would say this goes beyond Montessori as well, right? Just in general, the goal isn't to entirely reject screens or to fully embrace them, but rather to try to foster this harmonious relationship between digital engagement and these rich hands-on explorations in the real world. And so by practicing this intentionality, moderation with screens, and mindfulness when it comes to their use, we can start to use technology as a tool for learning and discovery while also valuing these irreplaceable experiences that come from interacting with the beautiful, wonderful world around us. As we wrap things up in our conversation today on mindful technology and the Montessori approach to screen time, I wanted to leave you with a powerful thought from Jason Christoff, who's an acclaimed speaker. He says, kids don't remember their best day of television. What they do remember are moments of connection, moments of discovery, hands-on learning. So as educators, caregivers, parents, it's up to us to create those meaningful experiences for them. That's why Maria Montessori talked about being the child's guide and creating a prepared environment. So by being mindful of the role that technology plays in children's lives, we can help them develop not just as consumers of information, but as creators, thinkers, doers, those things that we talked about in that first quote that are often disappearing because children are becoming mindless absorbers of technology. Thank you so much for being here today. I encourage you to continue prioritizing those rich real world experiences that really help shape memories with children and with you as their adults. Before I open it up to questions, I just
Well,
wanted to share my contact information with you here. I'll leave it up for a few moments. My email is there. If you have questions after today's discussion that we didn't get answered, please feel free to email me. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And I'd also love for you to check out my website and my social media accounts, which can be found with the handle at Montessori.matters. I share Montessori and other education, parenting and caregiving related content on all of those platforms that I hope that